Have you ever wondered if your body is even ready to handle high testosterone? Over the last 2 years, I've maintained a total testosterone level of over 1,000 naturally. But on my latest lab test, my level's at 1,300, and instead of celebrating, well, I had questions. First, why did it spike? And second, what's going on systemically? So in this video, I'm breaking down how I got to 1,300 naturally, the hidden reasons it might have happened, and why more testosterone isn't always better if your goal is long-term health and not just short-term gains. Now, I've been tracking my blood work for years now, and I usually try to aim between 3 to 4 times a year to stay on top of my blood markers. So when I opened up the last results, I didn't expect to be surprised, but there it was, my total testosterone level at 1,300. And my first thought was, wait, how is that even possible? Well, 1,300 sounds great on paper, but when a number jumps up that high without any change in protocol, it's not always a win. It could just be a fluke, a sign of dysfunction, or the result of something happening under the surface, like insulin sensitivity or even stress hormones compensating. And most people hear high T and right away associate it with high sex drive, muscle, or even being an alpha male. But I've been in the health game long enough to ask a different question, which is find out what my body is actually trying to tell me. So whether you're chasing optimal testosterone or just trying to stay healthy, here's the thing. More isn't always necessarily better. Too much testosterone, especially if free T is out of proportion, can mean your system might be overclocked and your thyroid, your liver, and even your brain might be picking up the tab. And the crazy part, you might not feel anything different at all until something breaks down. So for me, it wasn't about celebration. It was about getting deeper into knowing the why and to figure out if this was real, sustainable, and most importantly, healthy in the long run. Now, what I found next is something no one talks about when they praise and glorify high test levels all over social media and the hidden risks behind the perfect number. So when people talk about high test levels, it's always the highlight reel. Bigger lifts, better sex, more drive, and clearer skin. But what they don't talk about, what I wasn't prepared for, is the biological trade-off happening under the hood. Well, testosterone doesn't operate in a vacuum, and when it spikes, other internal systems try to bring your body into a state of homeostasis. First, cortisol rise to offset the increased metabolic demand. Second, cholesterol can climb since it's a precursor for steroid hormones. Third, thyroid hormones can downshift, especially if the body feels overstimulated. And in some cases, the liver or kidneys start carrying more load just to process the excess hormones circulating around. So you end up feeling great until you don't, and your recovery starts to slow down, your sleep quality dips, and you'll start needing more caffeine just to feel like your normal self again. On the surface, none of this looks like a testosterone issue, but it could possibly be your body compensating for hormonal imbalance behind the scenes. You might actually be running on borrowed time, because high testosterone isn't always a flex and may end up being a red flag. So, what caused my spike, considering I never touched TRT or any forms of anabolics or even supplements that could have raised them in the first place? Well, one simple shift in my daily habit may have been enough to tip the entire hormonal scale. So when you see a 1,300 total testosterone reading, your first thought would be, did the lab mess up? Because these numbers look a bit overblown. So now the question became, what changed that I wasn't paying attention to? Well, not much was changed other than the obvious variables, which was increasing calorie intake and decreasing my overall fasting times. I slowly reintroduced a consistent carb intake, especially around training, since I mainly trained in a fasted state. And it turns out carbs aren't just fuel for performance. They regulate your entire hormonal profile. So when you undereat carbs for too long, leptin, insulin, and even GnRH signaling can downshift, and your body starts to think that you're in a scarcity state, so it holds back on testosterone production. But when you reintroduce carbs again, especially after extended fasting or low calorie dieting, your body starts to feel safe again and ramps up reproductive hormones, which is what likely triggered my jump in T levels. So while everyone's out there trying to biohack their way into better hormones, I naturally boosted mine by eating more like a human again. Sometimes the fix isn't another supplement, running gear, or getting on TRT. It's removing the chronic stress you thought was helping, which in this case was long fasting times and limiting carb intake. But of course, there's always a catch. Just because something works doesn't mean it's right for everyone. And in some cases, high testosterone levels can often accelerate aging depending on your genetics, goals, and context. Now here's the part most people don't want to hear. High testosterone might make you feel like you've won the hormone game, but depending on your genetics, lifestyle, and long-term goals, that high number could be pushing you into the wrong direction and fast. The anabolic effects of testosterone is beyond great for building muscle, but that same growth signal can speed up cell turnover, fuel inflammation, and even accelerate the development of latent disease if your body isn't built to handle it. For example, men with naturally high testosterone have shown higher rates of blood clots and cardiovascular events in certain populations, since free T levels can suppress SHBG, which helps regulate hormone binding and detox. And if you're genetically predisposed to things like BPH, acne, hair loss, or even prostate issues, elevated T can pour gasoline on the fire and accelerate the inevitable if not handled properly. This is why two guys can have the same testosterone level and completely different outcomes. So an 18-year-old athlete might thrive with a total T level of 1200, but a 40-year-old with borderline prediabetes, poor sleep, and high stress, that same level could wreck his recovery and heart health. So don't get too hype about the number, because in the end, it's about the environment the number lives in. And if you don't understand how your body responds to testosterone, you might be optimizing for the wrong thing. So if more isn't better, then what is? Well, let's break down what smart testosterone optimization actually looks like, and how to support your hormones in a way that keeps you strong and healthy for the long run. Now, testosterone should be functional, supporting your brain, your metabolism, your recovery, and not just spiking it so high that it starts affecting other parts of your body just to stabilize. Smart optimization is not about cranking one hormone to the moon. It's about building a stable, adaptive system that makes testosterone when it's needed. That means dialing in the foundations first, which consists of carbohydrates timed to support recovery and leptin signaling, resistance training that builds muscle but doesn't fry your nervous system, and stress management that keeps cortisol from running the show. So no, your testosterone level doesn't need to hit 1300. In fact, 800 to 1000 with strong free T and low inflammation is often the sweet spot for long-term performance and protection. It's about how well your body uses your testosterone that you already have, not how high you can push it to impress a Reddit thread. So if your levels are climbing naturally, great, but don't stop at the lab result, and always ask yourself, how's your sleep efficiency? How's your insulin sensitivity? And how do you feel throughout the day? Asking these questions is what's considered real optimization, and the difference between chasing numbers and building a body that works. Here's the bottom line. Testosterone is quite powerful, but it's not a magic number. Having total T levels of 1300 at the age of 34 might sound impressive, and it might give you bragging rights. But if your foundation isn't solid, it could just be the first sign of something breaking. So if this video flipped the way you think about hormones, hit that subscribe button. Till next time.